now go back into our meeting, resume our meeting. Where we left off, we were just about to listen to Ms. Liz Lofton present public hearings number 3 and 4, which are going to be joined together. And this is related to the Gracewood PUD. One is an annexation and one is a question of a conditional rezoning. So, Ms. Lofton, you're up.
Gracewood PUD 17 CZ 18. The properties to be rezoned and annexed are mostly wooded and vacant and generally bounded by Old US 1, Horton Road, and the East Carolina Railway Corridor. One parcel located on the west side of the railroad corridor. Jordan Point subdivision currently under construction across Horton Road. The property is currently in Wake County's jurisdiction in Zone R80W and R40W. The applicant is proposing to rezone to Plan Unit Development Conditional Zoning. The 2030 land use map classifies the property subject to this zoning as rural density residential and low density residential. The proposed PUD is consistent with this classification. The applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on April 27th, and a copy of the neighborhood meeting report is included in the staff report. The PUD plan proposes an overall maximum density of 1.91 units per acre. The density for the property classified as rural density is 0, as no dwelling units are proposed on the west side of the railroad corridor. The proposed density for the remainder is 2.05 units per acre, which is less than 3 dwelling units per acre, which is permitted by the low density land use classification. The proposed minimum lot size is 7,500 square feet with an average lot size of 11,000 square feet. The PUD plan proposes at least 27% RCA, which includes an additional 2% above the minimum. The buffers are a 30-foot type A along Horton, a 30-foot type A along Old US 1, a 40-foot type A along the railroad, and the remainder areas will be a 20-foot type B. Parks and Rec Advisory Commission reviewed the PUD at their July 26th meeting and recommended a fee in lieu for the project. In addition, the developer shall construct a multi-use path along Horton Ridge Boulevard, starting at Horton Road, continuing approximately 900 linear feet into Gracewood, where it would terminate at a pedestrian network anticipated to include public sidewalk and private greenways. This will be coordinated at the time of master subdivision plan. The applicant is proposing to develop the project in 5 phases. The town of Apex will provide utility services. A water line will be extended along Old US 1 from Jordan Point. A regional wastewater lift station is being constructed adjacent to the project.
How far down does the water line, on Highway 1 go? Is it expected to be extended?
I believe it terminates right there.
At the entrance to the Jordan Point subdivision is where it ends right now. And we'll be coming down to Old US 1.
To the middle of your development, or?
We'll give him a chance to come up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, finish what you're doing.
We'll give you, hang on a second, we'll give you a chance to come up in a minute, and we'll let Ms. Lofton finish her presentation, and we'll table that question, okay?
So a full list of the architectural conditions are included in the PUD plan, and the single-family homes will include several architectural styles, including but not limited to craftsman, colonial, and traditional. A full list of the transportation conditions are included in the staff report and the PUD plan. To highlight some of them, the developer shall construct a full movement access point to Horton Road aligned with Jordan Point. The developer shall construct two full two full movement access points to Old US 1 a minimum of 800 feet apart. Planning staff can recommend approval of the rezoning with the conditions as proposed by the applicant because the proposed rezoning to PUD CZ is in keeping with the 2030 land use map, which classifies the subject properties as rural density residential and low density residential. Planning board did hear this item at their October 9th meeting and unanimously recommended approval. So, be happy to answer.
You said it was let me confirm your numbers, 1.91 units per acre, including the piece on the other side of the railroad tracks?
Yes.
And then,
Overall,
and then if you exclude that, you said it was 2.05?
yes.
11,000 square foot average lot size?
Yes.
And what did you say the minimum was?
7,500.
What's the breakdown of that? Do you know how many they are proposing? I mean, how do you get to an average of, how many, 7,500, and then how many?
So I'll let the applicant explain all of their breakdown.
Any other questions for staff? All right, thank you, Ms. Lofton. Applicant? Would the applicant like to say something?
Good evening again, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Jason Barron with Morningstar Law Group here on behalf of the applicant. Here with me tonight is Mr. Mark Ashness of the CE Group. They've provided land planning and engineering for the materials that are before you tonight. Also, Mr. Kevin Dean of Kimley Horn & Associates, who's been our traffic consultant on this project and has worked closely with Mr. Dalton and his staff. And then finally, Mr. Jack Morrissey, who is an owner of the development team. And Jack, you might not know Jack, but he's actually worked on a lot of projects here in Apex, the Food Lion Shopping Center, not too far from here, Shepherd's Vineyard. He was involved with the multifamily that's being worked on over in Nichols Plaza. Jack has worked on as well as several others. He's real familiar with the town of Apex. But I don't know if Jack has ever been in council chambers until we had to go to the planning board. I'll keep my comments brief. I'm hopeful this case is going to be a little bit easier to understand than the case that was before you tonight. It's certainly a less complicated plan unit development that is under consideration. Liz covered the details associated with the plan very well. It's a request for 448 units over 234.38 acres, which is right at 1.91, 1.92 overall dwelling units per acre. It is consistent with the land use plan. Land use plan, as you all are aware, recommends up to 3 units to the acre on this site. So we believe that the below 2 that is before you is reasonable and in the public interest. We had a productive neighborhood meeting. There were, as you've probably seen in the staff report, we had attendance at the neighborhood meeting. It was, I want to say it was 9 to 10, maybe 12 people who actually showed up. We had a good conversation, but nobody expressed opposition. And nobody showed up at the planning board, and I don't see that anybody has signed up for the public hearing tonight to speak on the case. And I think that was reflective of the fact that folks generally believe that this area will be developed at some point, and it's in keeping with the land use plan. As was noted, we have a recommendation from the staff in favor of this case. We have a unanimous planning board recommendation, which, in my experience, is really hard to get right now. With a full planning board especially, it was really hard, so we feel good about that. There's a large amenity included within the site, as is noted in the staff report. A minimum 4-acre amenity site is included as part of this development and is located towards the front entrance up along Old US 1. We have a robust system of trails included within the site, along with the mixed-use path that was requested by the Parks Recreation Advisory Board. That's included in our plans as part of the recent submittal. We've also conducted a traffic impact analysis for this site, and I'll note that we're incorporating all of the recommendations of that TIA. I'll note that it was conducted at a density count that was greater than what is before you tonight. I think it was at 468 units, and so it is conservative at this point. I'll also note that all of the improvements, all the intersection improvements that are recommended as part of that study, none of those are part of DOT or Town of Apex planned improvements. So if this project doesn't happen, those improvements won't be made until another project comes along and makes those type of improvements. And finally, with respect to the density, like I said, it's right at 1.91, 1.92 in that ballpark. I just want to touch on 3 projects that have been improved in this area. There's been 3 recent project approvals, and I think we kind of fall squarely within the project densities that you all have approved in this area. Jordan Manors is 1.98 units per acre. That's 240 units over 121 acres. Jordan Point is 1.5 units to the acre, which is 440 units over 295 acres. And lastly, the Woodbury subdivision is 2.66 units to the acre, and that's 400 units over 150 acres. And so I think the density is not only consistent with the land use plan, but it's entirely consistent with the densities that the town has been seeing and approving and is anticipating to be developed in this area. And with that, again, we're pleased with the planning staff's recommendation. We're really pleased with the unanimous recommendation of the planning board, and we would respectfully request you all's approval, and we're here to answer any questions you may have.
You guys are directly connected to Jordan Point, right?
That's correct. Yeah, well, I mean,
By
we're essentially sort of extending Horton Ridge Boulevard into our subdivision. It's shown as a collector street on the town's transportation plan through Jordan Point. It essentially terminates at Horton Road, and we are treating it as a collector street. Once it gets into our subdivision, it will be treated as a residential street. I mean, that was a request that was made by the staff.
Okay. So, follow up US Old 1, that you got Jordan Point and then Jordan Manors as you go
That's right.
north of that?
And then you've got Woodbury,
Woodbury.
East of the site,
East of the side.
Yep.
And you said the density on Jordan Point was what?
1.5.
How many units was that?
440?
Over more acreage, right?
Yeah.
So the average lot size, 11,000 square feet, what's the max gonna be?
There is no maximum. I mean, I don't think they would be adverse to applying a maximum lot size, but we haven't proposed one as part of the case yet, but I don't think we would be beyond it. I mean, if the concern is that we're gonna have one
No.
50,000 square foot, or, yeah,
Well,
I think we could address that if that's the issue.
no, well,
I think right now the numbers are parameters, but there's no subdivided map. There's no
Right.
Site plan.
site plan. Thank you.
Yeah, and you all obviously will see this again as part of a master subdivision approval, so you'll get the finer details associated with phasing and the kind of the breakdown on the lot. And Mr. Moore, you asked the question during the staff's presentation about what the breakdown is. We don't know what the breakdown is right now. We haven't proposed a breakdown. We just don't know what that's going to be. But we feel comfortable committing to a minimum of 7,500 and an average of 11,000.
What was the acreage of your site again?
234.
234. Do you know what the average lot size, this might be a staff question, of Jordan Point is?
The question again?
Average lot size, Jordan Point.
I don't believe that was specified at the time the PUD was approved.
Okay.
That would take a good bit of work to figure that out.
We don't have that number. Sorry.
We tend to, I'll save that till it's the right time.
Any questions for Mr. Barron?
I have a request.
All right.
Is it the right time, or should I wait?
Is it for Mr. Barron?
Yes.
Okay.
We had spoke earlier about a possible reduction in number of units. Have you guys had time to consult about that, and where do you stand on it?
We have, and as I mentioned, when we started this, and we don't have the ability, given the significant infrastructure improvements associated with the site, specifically with respect to the $1.5 million that they're gonna have to spend for off-site road improvements. We're kind of at that razor-thin margin about whether we have a project to move forward with or not. There's just a lot of infrastructure improvements associated with the site. You know, we could have come in, Mr. Moyer, and said, well, the land use plan says we can do up to 3 units to the acre, and proposed up to 3 units to the acre, and then given you a density concession as part of this hearing. But we didn't do that because I've been before you all, and I have seen the type of development you all are looking for, and I advised my client of that. And I said, you know, we're not going to play those games. We're going to give them less than 2 units to the acre because that's what they're looking for. We're going to give them more than 10,000 square foot lots because that's what they've been looking for. So I appreciate their request. You know, we can't move any further down. We've already moved down 20 as part of this process while we've been going through the rezoning, and we're just we're squeezed right now.
All right, thank you, Mr. Barron. At this time, I'll open the public hearing and refer to the sheets for public hearings number 3 and 4. See that no one signed up except for a few erroneous ones that are X'd out, and those folks have already left the room. So we will close the public hearing and now refer the matter to council for motion or discussion leading to a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Mayor, please recall we have an annexation first and then follow.
Yes, all right, so let me clarify. So we have, looking for a motion for both an annexation and the rezoning in a single motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the annexation and the rezoning.
All right, thank you. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
I'll just voice a quick opinion, because I always have one, but you know, this is a decent subdivision. I'm sure it's like Jordan Point in many respects, which was decent enough. The one concern I do have is mass grading that took place with Jordan Point. I don't know, nothing has been said about mass grading of this one. You've got if you have larger lots, it's sometimes nice to go with the topography. But the other really concern I have on all of these subdivisions that we see without some sort of a non-residential branch, and we don't expect it here, is that we continue to become more and more and more of a bedroom community. Across the street, across Highway 1, Old Highway 1, there's industrial zoned, and from what I understand from our last one, we can't have anything industrial in a PUD, so I can fully understand that situation. But somehow, we need to get off the ground even better with the non-residential. And this is an area where we have these subdivisions butting up against. So I'm not going to vote no on this, but I thank you both for making the motion on the second, because I didn't feel like I wanted to do that. But I just, from a philosophical standpoint, how can we push this thing so that we are truly an integrated town, and this sort of thing doesn't get us there?
Okay, Councilman? You have anything else you want to add? All right, then, having heard from everybody, I'll call for the vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. All right, I hear no no's, so I'm going to call that unanimous unless somebody objects. All right, thanks. That passes unanimously, and that was the annexation and the rezoning for the Gracewood PUD. Moving right along, we've got public hearing number 5. This is the modification, I think, to the rezoning application 17 CZ21 Sweetwater PUD Amendment. Amanda Bunce is presenting.
Yes, you are correct. This is a proposed amendment to the Sweetwater PUD, which, as you know, was approved in 2015 and did have a revision in 2016. There's a mixed-use area. So there are 3 primary changes that are proposed for the Sweetwater PUD. The first is to eliminate the buffer in this location, where you see the bubbled area, that is located between the Sweetwater mixed-use portion and the Smith Farm mixed-use portion. When Sweetwater was initially approved, Smith Farm had not even been submitted yet, was not in existence, and so a buffer was required as the adjacent property was residential. Now that area is programmed for mixed-use development, and so the idea being that if similar land uses could develop, there could be a more cohesive non-residential development in this area without a buffer strip running down that
You
property
said
line.
Very south side of that buffer strip, is that also, mixed use?
This is, a road, Core Bank Street, this is residential, so
To the left of
the
that,
elimination
though.
of the buffer stops on the north side of Core Bank Street.
Okay, but
And then
what-
the buffer picks back up here.
Okay, what about directly to the left of that, right there, underneath where it says Smith Farm PUD?
Smith Farm,
So go,
Um,
go down, right there, what is that, right there?
I believe that is the mixed-use portion as well, and that the residential portion, continues
Okay,
on.
so were you sure about that, or?
I can
Okay.
pull that PUD up and we can.
In the event that was residential, I would wanna make sure the buffer is still in place then, that's all. Okay, thank you.
So the second change is to amend the minimum first floor elevation on certain residential lots, and again, these are shown bubbled here. The original PUD was approved with a minimum 20-inch elevation, first floor elevation 20 inches above grade, and the proposal is to reduce that to 8 inches for these lots. That's 81 lots in total, which represents about 20% of the total number of single-family lots within the PUD.
What percentage? 20?
20%. In these lots, they are all rear-loaded lots, and the elevation falls from the front of the lot to the back of the lot. So the purpose for that, according to the applicant, is to assist with access issues into the units. Staff did make a recommendation that additional language be included to require dwelling units on these lots to be single-story. Structures with first floor master or master bedrooms on each floor, or structures with elevators, since the intent was to make the units more accessible. This language was not added. And finally,
It was not added?
it was not added. It was a suggestion just made by staff, but we...
Because of access, the reason for the change is for access.
Right.
So it would, from your guys' perspective, made sense to add a first floor master?
It was just a suggestion since the reason was accessibility, to kind of foster that accessibility, but it didn't affect the staff's recommendation in the end. It was just a suggestion by staff.
When we say accessibility, are we talking about handicapped accessibility?
Not necessarily.
Or-
And the applicant can
right.
elaborate on this further, the impact of how many steps you have to get into the unit, with the amount of grade change. They'll have more information on that
Okay, thank you.
specifically.
Isn't it more for old folk?
It's not necessarily just for people advanced in age.
Oh, well said.
And then the final amendment was that the Sweetwater PUD required the applicant to reserve right-of-way for the future 64 Richardson Road interchange based on the Highway 64 corridor study, which is still being shown on this plan. This is a inset, a blow-up of the intersection. This black area represents the right-of-way reservation area. The proposal is to have the ability to develop within this reservation area, to develop it as surplus parking and related facilities such as lighting, landscaping, storm drainage, etc., with the understanding that these improvements may be removed in the future if the area held in reservation is obtained by NCDOT or the town of Apex. And then the text further goes on, the developer shall make necessary provisions to accommodate the future loss of parking by appropriate site planning and relocating the 50-foot Type A buffer. So the 50-foot Type A buffer would be reestablished wherever the right-of-way area additional right-of-way area is obtained. So it could be that not all of this area is needed. That's just as unknown at this point until the final design of that interchange is approved.
I can see that, it makes sense, what's being asked. I guess the question I do have is, who foots the bill to remove the stuff when that time comes, if it does come?
Yeah.
Is there a provision in there?
There's no provision in the PUD that the developer would make up that difference at any cost for that area, but
I would think
the applicant
that would be
could
a requirement.
address that.
All right.
So in closing, planning staff is recommending approval of the proposed PUD amendment as proposed by the applicant. The planning board heard this item on October 9th and unanimously unanimously voted to recommend approval of the rezoning. And staff believes that the rezoning is in the public interest because the amendments add design flexibility for single-family lots that are affected by grade changes. They eliminate a buffer that would prevent coordinated development of the mixed-use areas within Sweetwater and Smith Farm PUDs, and provide for the temporary use of a right-of-way reservation area for the mixed-use portion of the development. Any questions for me?
All right, thank you. As I open the public hearing, I noticed that there are no people signed up, so we will close the public hearing.
Does the applicant want to make?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Good point. Before I close the public hearing, why don't you feel free to
Good
tell us
evening,
what you got. Yes,
council
sir.
members and staff. I'm Mark Ashness with the C Group. We've been fortunate enough to be working on the mixed-use portion of the project since about this time last year, and as you can imagine, in working through that process, we're now getting ready to initiate the master subdivision aspect of the mixed use, so you'll be seeing that coming to you sometime this spring. Some issues have started to flesh out, and two of the issues that Amanda mentioned are directly related to the mixed use portion. The first one, the use in the reservation area, as you can appreciate, that area is really our front door to the project. They're off of 64, and for the foreseeable future until Richardson extends further back into the town itself. And so it's important that there's a presence there and it doesn't feel sort of like a detached area that you'd have coming into the project. And so it's important to utilize some of that area in the near term. It may be 15 years, it may even be longer before an interchange would happen out there. So what we're proposing in that area is surplus parking and the associated facilities. And as such time that area might be taken by NCDOT, then those items would be removed. The second item, as Amanda mentioned, was the transition area, the landscape yard with Smith Farm. Again, looking at our uses and ultimately not knowing yet what would happen at Smith Farm, we think it's important for that area to feel somewhat seamless. We see either parking transition moving across those boundaries or service area behind our buildings or behind their buildings in the future. So we think it's beneficial to both projects to have that landscape yard removed. The third issue deals primarily with the residential construction. David and Corey Schmidt are here tonight. They're building that project right now. If you've been out there and looked at it, they're doing a very nice job with the architectural vernacular. And they've got several types of products out there. The specific product that we're referring to tonight, I would refer to as like a shotgun house. It's basically a very narrow lot, narrow house, but it's also very deep. And the drives are fed in the back off of an alley. So the lots that we've identified, which is roughly 20% of the single-family lots, are on the low side of the road. And so that relationship, the difference between 20 inches and 8 inch across the frontage, really accounts for two rises, basically coming out of the garage and moving back up into the house. And so we've selected basically two rows on the low side of those streets where that product occurs. And Michael Clark was the staff planner that initially asked, hey, what about some specificity or variation? Our view was, since we don't have driveways on the front street, all of these homes are going to sit very close to each other in relationship, and we thought it might be odd having an 8 inch and then a 20 inch and then an 8 inch, or two 20s and then an 8. So it's really more of a consistency issue on our part, and that's why, and when we presented that information back to Michael, he agreed, and that's why there wasn't really any further discussion on having specificity of the type of house. We felt like it was important to have that consistency of frontage along that, given the narrowness of each of these lots. And I'll be glad to answer any specific questions you might have about these changes that we're proposing.
Before we take the questions, can I get your name again?
Mark Ashness.
Mark Ashness.
301 Glenwood Avenue, Raleigh, North Carolina.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ashness. Any questions?
Yeah, I'm still not clear on this whole rise thing.
Mm-hmm.
You said you want consistency, but why wouldn't it be, if everything was 20 inches, why wouldn't that be consistent?
Yeah, so it would be consistent. What happens is on the lots that are falling, so the garages and the alleys are sitting lower than the house.
Right.
And so in those lots, you're already going to have upwards of 3 feet of vertical transition from the garage to the back area where the house is, since the garages are not attached in the front. And so that difference of a foot really, that difference eliminates two rises in that tread relationship coming from the garage to the house. And so that's the benefit of having that. A lot of the people that are purchasing those particular homes are empty nesters. I'm not going to say they're age challenged, but they're people that truly would appreciate not having to go up two more rises from the garage to the back of the house. And so it's sort of a unique situation, because I think you would agree most of the homes you're seeing are not alley fed in the town. And so these low side lots, once we started working in that area, they realized, hey, there's some transition issues here on the lots that are falling.
So why did you guys not include staff's recommendation of first floor masters in these units, if they're for empty?
No, there are actually first floor masters. What occurs is there's a tremendous variation. If you've been out there, you see there's a lot of different architectural styles in the houses that are being built right now. And so if we had it specified to say 3 types of uses along that row of homes that we're showing there, if there was one of those homes that didn't fit that criteria, then it would pop up that extra 12 feet. And these lots are very narrow, so
12 inches.
12 inches. I'm sorry. That 12 feet really gives you a scale change. Sorry about that. So again, in a normal lot, you've got a wider lot here, and you've got a driveway, and you've got different sort of physical changes that occur from one lot to the next. These lots are very narrow, so you would see that sort of abrupt change occur. So it's really just providing consistency along the row front of those houses there.
I'm sorry. So how does that affect the first floor master suggestion that staff had made?
Because some of the homes might not have a first floor master on that row of streets. So if we had it limited to only certain homes that had like a first floor master, then if there was a house along that band that we showed that didn't have a first floor master, then we would be subject to having a higher FFE. That's what. So when the staff made that recommendation, they hadn't really thought through the consistency or the uniformity of the narrow lots. And when I mentioned that back, they said, we're fine with that.
Personally, I'd still like to see the 20-inch rise.
Well, it's less expensive also to make, to get rid of that 12 inches, because you don't have a perimeter wall to build up quite so much. Or backfill and stuff, but I can understand that.
I've seen some older people, it's not me, older people that have steps up in their garage, and they have a difficult time just going up 4 steps, you know, in from their garage to their house, and it's connected, it's not on the outside. So
Hang on.
And I think that it's not just older people too. I think sometimes you're having people that have had knee surgery or some kind of surgery or whatever, and they are trying to get into their house. So, I mean, I can see the need. I mean, I've watched a friend's father trying to get in the house and can't do it.
I guess I can see that point, but then to me, that's just not the house for that. Just like, you know, should we change our ordinance to make everything at grade?
Well, it may be my house, but my relative may be coming to visit, and they're not going to be able to get in it.
All right, let me redirect this for a second.
Mr. Jensen may not be able to get in my house.
Yeah, I might not make it.
So, Mr. Ashness, did you have a response to Councilman Jensen's comments? Or
I don't mind. I
Okay.
mean, I just said it is less expensive.
Well, the point I want to make again,
I don't think that's the real.
is this is a unique house style we're talking about. This is a house that the lot width is, what would you say, it's 30? So they're 28 to 36 foot wide. So they're not, there's no side driveway, no side garage. It's literally the garages are alley fed. And I think, in projects that have alley fed lots, it would be a serious issue on the lots that are falling, where you have the alleys sitting several feet below the road on the front. And all those lots are uniformly falling. This is not a side hill type situation. You've got several feet from the curb in the front of the house to the alley in the back of the house. So we're already going to be dealing with at least, say, 3 feet, which is maybe your normal transition that you might have if you have your garage on the side of the house. So what we're just simply trying to do is minimize that further, and that's 2 additional rises. And the makeup of the people that are, you know, looking in that area, you're right, they could pick a different house, but that's a specific model. Those shotgun homes is what I'll refer to them, versus some of the other homes to the east are larger in scale, so it's a different type of product.
How many units were you talking about making this change to?
81, yeah. And they're all, they're all basically in a row. You can see right here on this row.
Do you have any pictures or architectural things that you...
I do not, but I can tell you that the alleys are several feet below the finished road in the front.
So, I'd like to ask you if you have a response to the question about the cost. I guess, Councilman Jensen, before we go there, was your concern that it would lower the value of the home?
No, I just feel it's part of the drive. It probably is construction costs, and I can understand that. It doesn't bother me to have this that much, because I look at Pulte, we let Pulte do it in some of their areas too. But I do have a problem that we're talking 20 inches difference, and that is 2 rises, but if a person can make it up 3, they can make it up 5. At the same time, I have trouble being the bureaucrat that I am to stick requirements that aren't necessary. You know, I can accept.
It may be helpful for David to speak briefly, if that's okay. He's the builder.
Yeah, I was getting to that, but I just wanted to make sure that I was trying to determine if that was a factor in his decision-making or if it was just a random comment. But if the cost, because the reason I asked that is because I expressed that concern, and I was given some information that leads me to believe it's not actually less expensive due to the techniques, but I'm happy to have Mr. Schmidt come up if it addresses a real concern.
The driver in
Is not?
It's not.
All right.
It's just, it does help a little bit, but when you look at the whole size of the house and the cost of putting the house together and the electrical wiring and all of that stuff, we're getting into the noise level, I believe. But I don't want it to be a driving factor.
Could you do everyone a favor, your piece of paper covering your microphone? There you go.
I'll put my cup on it instead.
Thanks.
Okay.
Sometimes I think it might not be the cost of the doing that, it may be the fact they can't sell them because people don't want to have to climb up those steps.
And I understand, it gives a variety, it does give a variety, and the reason that I'm fine with it, we're talking 20% of the housing types, not a whole bunch more, and I think in Pulte, we were talking a whole bunch more, and there was another development where we were talking a whole bunch more. So 20% is, understandable with the topography, I guess. And once again, I don't think we should over require, and I think I'm satisfied with the 20%.
Okay.
That's all.
Is there an open question for Mr. Ashness?
I'm going to leave it go.
Okay. Anyone?
Oh, okay.
I just want to let him have a seat. If he doesn't need to stand for the entire rest of the meeting, I don't think.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Ashness.
No, before you sit down there,
Yeah.
it is agreed that you said you would remove it, so the developer is required to remove the parking lot aspects.
Let me clarify
At
that.
cost?
It's typically what would happen, and again, we're talking about a long way down the road, is we would not, the DOT would come in and do a taking at that time. Now, we wouldn't have any buildings in that area, but typically the NCDOT, if they did those improvements, they would pull that information out in a demolition. That cost is not going to be
Too much.
significant. It won't be, I'll be honest with you. We're talking about curb and gutter, asphalt, those types of
Or
things.
you're talking about lighting and electrical.
Yeah, lighting poles, I mean, they may be salvaged, the lighting poles, those are the kind of things that you could, possibly reuse. So, we would prefer to leave it just like anyone else on that 64 corridor. When those improvements happen, DOT is gonna come in and do whatever improvements they need. We, as staff had, recommended, we will definitely, anticipate, additional parking outside the reservation area so that we can still accommodate, the activities. But what this will do for us in the near term is will allow us to make those front areas more active, more usable, because we're talking about a long time. I mean, we all may not even be involved with what's happening, hopefully not, but when DOT makes that taking out there, if they make that taking. So to us, it just makes sense to utilize that area in the near term so that it'll be our front door.
And it does, and I agree with you. The other question, though, is there's an A buffer that goes along there. I think it's 50 feet wide?
Yes, we went back and forth with the staff on this, and at the end of the day, we will reestablish that landscape yard wherever they're taking it
And that
first.
would be at your bill, or whose bill would that be at?
Well, we will be accommodating that. So in other words, anything that we build outside of the agreed-upon reservation line, we will make sure that we're not putting anything in that area that would be, we would have to re-landscape it, yes.
Yeah,
That's
and
your
that's
answer,
the
yes,
question.
yes.
It's, I mean, landscaping isn't the cheapest thing in the world.
Right.
I have learned about that, trying to put in buffers along
Sure.
Olive Chapel. And I had to be sitting down when I got the cost,
I
and then
have
I
a
was
question.
falling down.
Does Experience One enjoy being in front of the council? This is the second time. Hopefully this will be the last time that we...
Yeah, I think we'll be in front of you one more time, but hopefully that'll be for a whole lot of good stuff, where we'll have some nice pictures and there'll be some activity happening in the mixed-use side when we're in front of you next time. That's right.
When you remove these buffers, and I agree with that too, the one dividing the Smith, I guess is there a way of redistributing some of that to a degree?
I think what our view was is, and we haven't had any detailed discussion with the Smith Farm other than they're aware that we were removing that. We just felt like there's either an opportunity that we could have a shared service area behind. They may have a building that backs up, and we have a building that backs up along that property line. There may be a service alley that we both sort of share cross-access, or there'll be parking that'll sort of seamlessly move across that line. So if you're the public using those areas, you don't really feel like you're crossing from one project to the other.
And I agree with that. I look at parking lots and not adequate trees running around. You go here in the summer and it's the battle for the tree.
That's right, parking
Parking
lots.
lot.
Yep.
And, I guess my thought was, if we're gonna remove that there be some, at least, effort by you folks to try to
Well, and you'll see this back
redistribute
again. Ultimately, you'll see this again when we actually have something that we know that's going to occur there.
Okay, you'll be in trouble then. All right.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm good.
All right, very good. So at this time, thank you, Mr. Rashness. You feel free to have a seat. Before I close the public hearing, and I think I don't have a question for Councilman Jessup, but Mr. Schmidt, while the public hearing is open, I think maybe there's a question that Councilman Schultz would like to sort of toss your way if you want to address one.
Yeah, I just want to hear further explanation about the reduction in rise from 20 inches to 8 inches, please.
For the record, David Schmidt, 905 Dominion Hill Drive, Cary. As you know, I'm one of the owners of Experience One developing the site. And when we started the project, one of the goals we had, and let me back up just a second, demographics today, U.S. Census Bureau, 43% of today's population is 55 and older. I turned 64 3 weeks ago. And in 2020, that grows to 47%. There isn't enough development being put in the ground for all the seniors that are aging, who don't want big lots and don't want big houses and certainly don't want to see steps. I've had my left hip replaced. I've got a bad left knee and a bad right hip that's hereditary from, arthritis. I hate it, but it is what it is. So I avoid steps like the plague. So what we're trying to do here, and the plans that we're selling, it's about 55 or 6% of our sales are to 55 and older people. You're welcome to come out and see them. And they're loving what we're doing because we have first floor masters, we've got ranch plans, even some of our second floor masters have, and a $350,000 house have elevator options. We're having people put the rough end elevator now, so as they get older, instead of having to move someplace else, they can call the elevator company and have the elevator installed that time. So the steps is a big issue. That's what we're trying to eliminate here, is to get the steps out, because fortunately for us, the very first part of this project, we only had about 6 or 7 lots where we had more than 3 steps going to the house. Mark was saying there's 3-foot grade separation between the garages, and this is only for the lots that fall from the front to the back, where you've got the grade going this direction. If you remember, the site starts high as you come off of 64, and it falls down to the stream buffer, which is where all the water runs down to. So the lots that we're talking about, there's sometimes 3.5 as much as 4 feet of grade separation between where the foundation of the house is and where the garage is. That's 6 or 7 steps. That's not 2 or 3. That's 6 or 7. And what we're working right now with the engineer to try to figure out how to regrade this. There is no cost savings to us because we're going to have to regrade these lots at a cost of $1,000 to $1,200. And since the pads are already grade, the foundation height really doesn't there's no cost savings because we're already having to put where the grade drops off the back, the amount of block and stuff is almost identical whether we do it. So there is actually a cost increase. We want to accommodate these older folks that don't want to see a step. Now, step to them is another four-letter word, and I understand it, I get it with the joint problems I have. And with 55 or 6% of our buyers being that age group, we're actually trying to figure out how to eliminate more of the steps instead of just say, well, somebody can do 2, they can do, 3 or 4. But when you have joint problems like this, I'm promising you, it's not fun. It's a very unpleasant, situation. It makes you, I'm only 64 and I got joint problems, and I got friends that are 75 and don't, but I have a lot of friends that do have it. So we're really accommodating these older folks that are buying the houses. And again, the first floor masters and the ranch plans and the elevator option we have in the plans. We did want to do, because we do have second floor masters in the series of homes, and because we're trying to vary the architectural elevations across the board, we didn't want to limit those plans and have a streetscape that was all of just ranch plans or all just first floor masters, where we have just certain elevations. By offering the second floor masters, we get to vary the streetscape. We have a very hard rule about keeping houses 5 feet apart that are same the elevation and different colors.
Yeah. Just real quick, so now you're going from 3 steps to 1 step on the front elevation?
The elevation in front is still going to be 2 steps, because there'll be 12 inches, 8 inches out of ground. That's close. The way the grades are going to work, I don't think it'll either be 1 or 2 steps.
Okay.
But the grade separation at the back is the problem. It's the front we're not worried about. And for the lots that fall from the back to the front, where the foundation is going to be 3 feet out of the ground, you're going to have 3 or 4 or 5 steps up there with a handrail on them. But that's not the problem, because those people, the lot is fairly flat. You have no steps on those houses because people are coming in from the garage to get into the house.
All right.
So it's the steps from the garage up the other direction. And the 6 or 7 is very problematic with the buyers we have out there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
We
Schmidt.
appreciate your consideration.
All right, that concludes our public hearing, so I'll close the public hearing and refer the matter back to council for a motion.
Motion to approve.
I'll second. I will second.
All right, we got a motion and a second to approve. Any discussion on the motion? Not hearing any, I'll call for the vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Public hearing number 6, Amanda Bunce is going to present amendments to the UDO related to buffers.
Just one amendment today. So the amendment proposed is to the section of the portion of the buffer section regarding buffers along fully and limited access controlled highways, which are basically 64, US 1, and 540. In order to allow properties that face a limited or controlled access highway with no other access or road frontage the opportunity to reduce the required buffer to a 50-foot buffer with a mixed opacity type that is no more than 50% type E, with the remainder being type A. So essentially these are lots that front on one of these roads have only access on a limited access controlled road, which in effect is really only Highway 64 and is a very limited number of properties. If you'll recall, it wasn't that long ago that the opacity was changed from the ability to reduce the buffer to a 50-foot, from a 50-foot type E, that opacity was increased to a type A buffer. So we're proposing language that would apply to a limited number of parcels to allow a mixed type of opacity, somewhat similar to what was approved for Costco. Be happy to. Planning Board recommended a unanimous approval on October 9th.
All right, questions?
I'd just like to say, I was the one pushing it, or asked for this, and even though I love heavy buffers and I pushed for the type A, the only other thing that I would want to have this for is for non-residential, not for residential.
This does,
It is.
this only applies to non-residential.
Okay, that's the important point. But I think it, to provide for visual opportunities for businesses, I think is important, and we'll see how this works. I don't want to see people's properties devalued because of what we're doing. And certainly if it's residential, it's not devaluing the property to have people do something that's correct. In this case, I think doing it correct is to allow the visibility for the businesses.
And I would still like to see something done over at the, at Wake Med at the hospital complex, where you can't see that there's a hospital there from when you're on,
Yeah,
William Street. If there's some way to do something about it eventually,
come back.
keep that in mind, the
Well,
next 2 years.
personally,
I mean,
yeah, my next 2 years,
The next 2 years, keep that in mind.
should have run.
is
Running,
Highway 64,
Run away.
I'm gonna cut that. Is Highway 64 the only road this applies to, 55 or 540?
No.
540, and US 1 are the other limited or controlled access highways. Those are actually controlled access highways. 64 is limited access. So it's really gonna apply to 64. 55 is a completely different buffer type.
All right, thank you, Amanda. This time I'd like to open the public hearing, and I have one person who has signed up to speak, Belinda Hester.
So,
Thank you for waiting so long.
I did, and I hope that it will be positive in my response. I am Belinda Spears Hester, and I have owned the property 2701 and 2717 West 64 Highway since 1985. So I was there long before Abington subdivision, long before Sweetwater, and I think I've been very cooperative in dealing with both of those, in coming into the TJ and also providing Apex access across my property for the water line. And this does, in fact, impact me tremendously. I put my property on the market in 2015, received an offer in 2016, and the developer and his engineer had a pre-application meeting with the technical review committee, and this was in the letter that I wrote you on August the 25th. At that time, they came back and said their biggest complaint was, and a real big surprise to me, was that it was a Type A opaque buffer requirement, which I had no idea, because when I had had discussions with the water easement and also when we were talking about the ETJ, the buffer was always the Type E, and so that was a complete surprise to me. I only have one entrance, and it's on and off of Highway 64, and I understand, that I'm a big tree person too, but you have to have visibility for commercial real estate. And I will just read one comment from the response back from the developer who was wanting to, or has proposed buying this property. He's made the offer with a huge reduction, but it also says this would remain contingent with the seller getting the town of Apex to approve the buffer change and allowing good visibility to the buildings from the highway. I hope that this goes forward, but even if it doesn't, any other buyer would also have to have visibility. So I hope that you will agree with this proposal and see that it would be a detriment to me. Thank you very much.
You don't live on the property, it's commercial property that you own, is that right?
I lived on it until 1999, and it has been rented ever since then.
Okay, but your intent is to use it as commercial?
I do.
Okay, thank
Yes. And the zoning has been, PCCU, ever since it came into the Apex ETJ.
where is it specifically?
Thank you.
You know where Abington subdivision is? Well, I'm the donut. I'm like the hole, and the Abington is all around me. And actually,
Does the pipeline go through your
it goes right through my property. So that's why I have it, it's 2701 and 2717. Yeah. So I have a lot of buffers already.
All right, thank you, Ms. Hester.
Yes,
All right,
thank you.
with that, I'll close the public hearing, refer the matter back to council.
Well, may I make a motion? to
Yes,
approve?
of course.
I make a motion. to
I'll
approve.
second.
Motion for approval with a second from Councilman Moyer. Discussion on the motion?
Good.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All right, that passes unanimously. Thanks for coming around. Thanks for sticking around. We now move to public hearing number 7. This is a report from the Economics Development Director, actually a request for a possible motion for an approval. So, with that, Ms. Helms, you have the helm. Oh, I've done that one before, haven't I?
You have.
Sorry, I'll try not to do that one again.
Okay, never gets old.
Good evening. So I thought I would address this item with just a first couple of questions. First question is why? The reason we've been pursuing this opportunity is simple. We need a site or sites that are available for sale so that we may aggressively pursue the multiple prospective companies searching for a location in our market. These companies represent job creation and capital investment. Next question, what? The proposed contract is an agreement between the town and a private property owner to co-develop a 121-acre site located at 451 Pristine Water Drive. The appraised value of the site is $6.67 million, or roughly $55,000 per acre. Next question, how? Anticipated cost to the town associated with the development of the site, and the terms are as follows. There will be a ground lease. The initial lease will be for 3 years, plus an opportunity to add 3 additional three-year leases for a total of 12 years to have the site under control. The lease payments will be the amount by which the property taxes are increased from the previous year. The option to purchase will be $100 per year. Deferred taxes. The town will provide funds if the property owner has to pay taxes as a result of a change of the zoning. However, that will be credited towards any initial purchase price by the town. The purchase price is the same as the appraised value, roughly $55,000, excuse me, plus 25% of the equity created by the town's development and the marketing efforts. And lastly, initial infrastructure, which is estimated to be somewhere between $1 million and $3 million. And finally, when? Upon final execution of this agreement, the clock begins ticking. We have assigned completion dates to multiple development and marketing milestones to keep us on task to make sure the site is shovel-ready and certified as soon as possible. However, initial marketing will begin almost immediately. So in conclusion, the Economic Development Committee, staff, management, and legal counsel have worked diligently to ensure this opportunity was thoroughly vetted and is the best possible scenario to assist us in accomplishing our objective of job creation and capital investment. We've kept you, the council, updated along the way. We appreciate your thoughtful consideration on this matter.
All right, thank you, Ms. Helms. Questions from the council? For any staff? All right, not hearing any. Is there a motion?
Public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, this is a public hearing. I will open the public hearing, and see that, no one, well, at least there's a marked out name, so no one intended to stick around long enough to speak tonight. So I'll close the public hearing and refer the matter back to council.
Would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'm excited about this opportunity for us to be at the table with these major projects that come to town. So I will make a motion that we approve this.
Is there a second?
Go ahead.
Second.
All right.
All right, we have a motion and a second for approval. Any discussion?
This has been a long time coming,
You took the words out of my mouth.
and,
Say it.
You can say it.
Long time coming.
There you go.
okay. And I think we have a very good deal for both the town and for the cash, folks, and it's a great opportunity for us to get at the table with the larger developments that we really need here.
For those here, Cash is the surname of the family.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just to make sure we weren't talking about
Doing it for cash.
doing it for cash.
This is true.
Good for cash. All right, thank you very much. With that, let me just, if there are no further comments, I'll call for the vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no.
That was an aye, sorry.
Okay, that's all right.
I was late, sorry.
All right, that passes unanimously. That concludes our public hearing. At this time, we have old business, and then we have a closed session. So with that, check the clock. Okay, so we have an old business item. Councilwoman Wilkie has asked about an update on the Tunstall House.
So I would like you to know what the update on the Tunstall House Task Force is.
Okay,
Has anybody been appointed to that? Is there anything going on with that?
okay. So, first of all, it's customary and courteous to provide an expected speaker with an advance request, but however, I can say that on the November 21st meeting, I will have all those appointments here in front of the council.
And have you talked to different people that are interested, or, because I know people have given me names.
Not everyone.
Okay, people have given me names that want to be on that. Would you like me to share
Yes,
those
that
with
would
you,
be
or would
fine.
you like to choose them yourself?
If you have some names of people who have expressed interest, I'm welcome to,
Okay, sure.
to hear any of them.
I'll give them to you right now.
All right? All right, without objection, we'll move through the agenda. And at this time, we'll go past the rest of the items. We have a closed session item for consulting with the town attorney and to discuss a personnel matter. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor of going to closed session for these purposes indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. All right, that motion is unanimous. Let the public be advised that we have no items beyond the closed session. You're welcome to stay if you wish.